This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. On today's program, we're going to look at where we are going as a nation very quickly with 100% mathematical precision. We can calculate based on current trends, projected trends. I mean, there's no rocket scientist stuff. Anyone with a minimal capacity to use their brain can figure out where America will be in 5 or 6 years, just based on observing the present trends going on in our society and assuming correctly that if they continue, if these present negative trends continue, it will place us as a society, as individuals, in a particular kind of world which we're not going to like a lot. You say, well, how can you be sure? It's very, very simple, because we have the lessons of history. So my question would be, why would you even ask that question? Why would you even ask the question, how can we be sure, if you know anything about history? Because history, I'm talking about history in the last 100 years, 120 years, shows you what happens to a nation that is going through the things that America is going through now. Now, this program is not intended to be fatalistic and gloom and doom by any means. Because even though we can project with mathematical certainty where we will be as a nation and as a people in, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, I mean, even shorter than that. Even though we can anticipate very accurately what's going to happen, because we have all these historical examples to look at where nations had similar things happening in them. But the one thing that we still have the opportunity of doing is we don't have to end up in the negative world which we are moving rapidly towards. And even though I said we can anticipate that we will enter that very negative world with 100% mathematical precision and accuracy, that does not mean for a minute that we really have to end up there. Because the entire projection scenario is based on if the current trends continue. See, the projection is 100% certain, but it's based on a variable. The variable is if present trends continue and the present mindset of, let's say, Americans and Christians and churches, if it remains the same as the negative trends, yes, you can bank on it. There won't be anything in the banks, but you can bank on it that we're going to arrive in a very negative world with 100% mathematical precision. However, if we say, regarding the variable, that we will make changes. So let's say the negative current events continue, and they're going to continue, by the way. You better believe they're going to continue. If you think they're not going to continue, you're in la la land. You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. Yes, you are, because the negative trends are not only going to continue, but based on the sheer force and intensity of all these negative trends, anyone with half a brain can figure out that these trends are accelerating in speed, they're intensifying in force, the pressure and change they're exerting on society is far more powerful, and to put it bluntly, it's growing and growing and growing. So yes, we can expect the current negative trends to continue and to escalate. But here's the variable, once again. If the current mindset of Americans and the current mindset specifically of Christians remains the same, which means if the thinking, if the beliefs, if the actions of the Christian church, Christian leaders, and Christians continues to be the same now and continues to be the same as it is moving into the future, and this growing trend of accelerating negative trends continues, if the Christian church, the Christian leaders, the Christian mindset does not change radically, then yeah, it's a slam dunk. It's a negative slam dunk. We will 100% end up in a nightmare world in the relatively near future. But once again, that part is a variable. It's not fatalism. It's not set in stone. If we decide, and when I say we, it doesn't have to be 100% of Christians, Americans who have Christian values, etc. It doesn't have to be 100% of Christians and Christian churches and Christian leaders to change their mindset. That's the good news. It only has to be 8%. It would be better if it was 20 to 24%. It's still doable and winnable if there's a change in just 4% of the Christian population, the Christian leaders, and the Christian people in America. If only 4% changed the way they're dealing with reality, their thinking, etc., we could still turn it around. 8% guaranteed we could turn it around. You go to 20%, you are unstoppable. Literally unstoppable. So, the critical thing is that we make the changes necessary. Because if we don't, and I'm not exaggerating at all, I'm not exaggerating one iota. If we don't, we will arrive in a future where we will literally weep and cry over what has come. And there's no exaggeration in those words. I just spoke to you the truth. What you choose to do with it is between you and God. But I spoke to you the truth. Remember that. I told you the truth. Now, again, this is not about doom and gloom. This is about summoning the courage to face reality as it is and not live in the land of make-believe. You know, people act like they've been called to the mission field of Disneyland, but it's the Disneyland of the mind. That's where most Christians live. That's where most Christian churches live. That's where most Christian pastors live. In the Disneyland of the mind. That's not cruel. That's not unkind. That's an accurate appraisal. I simply used a creative way of expressing a tangible idea. They live in the Disneyland of the mind. Because they choose to, and by the way, a Disneyland of the mind is an illusory land. It's an illusion. You buy your ticket and you get to enjoy the illusion of Disneyland or Disney World. And everybody has fun, especially if you have kids. But you understand when you're taking your kids or yourself or whatever to Disneyland or Disney World, you understand it's an illusion, but you're having fun in the illusion that you paid for. But when you deal with the real world, and the way you cope with the real world is that you disconnect from reality and you pretend you're living in a Disneyland, that's very dangerous. So let's ask this question. Imagine for a moment, and you can see all the current events going on in television. There are many trends happening right now, and it would be very naive not to fully understand that what you're seeing happening in our social landscape right now, all the issues that keep tearing up the media, all the themes that keep dominating the media, all the news stories that keep dominating the media. You need to understand, as most of you do that listen to this program, the Paul McGuire Report, you need to understand that none of that is by random chance, none of that is by circumstance, none of that is by coincidence, none of that is just happening, It's all intelligently planned. It's all scripted. There are people who are very powerful in this world and in this nation who have a plan, a specific plan and a specific agenda. And to sum it up, in using their own terms, the strategy they use, these very powerful people, the strategy that they use is called order out of chaos. It's an occult term because the people who run our society and world are deeply involved in the occult. They pretend to be humanists publicly, but they're secretly very involved in the occult. And it's an occult principle. It's a principle of secret societies to employ what's called order out of chaos. A more contemporary interpretation of the principle of order out of chaos is the communist community organizer principle called manufactured crisis, where activists who are socialist, communist, Marxist activists create an internal revolution in society. They move society, they flip society into a socialist state. And of course, you know that there's no such thing as socialism. If you read the history of the top communist leaders, they all said openly and publicly that there's no such thing as socialism. The whole purpose of socialism is trickery. It's to get people to take that first step into Marxism and communism. So they soften up Marxism and communism and they call it socialism, but socialism is just a seductive way of getting people to move into Marxism and communism. Now, everything I just explained to you, including the occult nature of the elite that control this nation, and everything that I just have been saying to you for the past couple of minutes, is all explained clearly and simply, but far more in depth in my new book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World, which we have finished the edit. It's being set up for printing, and the door is still open, and then it's going to shut for you to pre-order the book at a special discount price. And if you pre-order the book now, while that opportunity still exists, you get a discount on the book, you get your copy rushed to you before it's available to the general public, and you get an autographed copy of the book. But to do that, you need to go to paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us, and order now. And I don't know what the number of pages will be of the book until it's finally been prepped for the printer. I suspect it will be thicker than we thought it would be. So that means the price of the book, when it's released to the general public, will probably be higher than we expected because, as you know, the thicker the book, the more it costs for printing, etc., and the more it costs for mailing. So if this is a book you're interested in, and you should be, save yourself some money and pre-order it now at paulmcguire.us and get copies for people you know and spread the word. Everything that, I don't write books because I'm motivated by money. Anybody who knows me, if you've ever met me in person, it's obvious when you see my eyes and look at me face to face that I'm motivated by a vision, by a call from God, by a deep burden for what I know is going to happen in the society unless we make changes. That is what motivates me. Money has never done it for me. It doesn't mean I don't need the money to live on. Of course I do, just like you do. It doesn't mean our ministry doesn't need money to run on. Of course it does. But I've never been money motivated. And I'm not judging other people. Some people, the big thing for them is these financial goals. And, sometimes it's important to have financial goals, but that's not my motivation. My motivation is the calling that the Lord has given me, the burden of the Lord, and a zeal, a passion produced by the Holy Spirit to stand up and be counted, to be faithful to getting the message out so that we can change the future. And I approach that whole dynamic with a spiritually militaristic attitude. And why do I say spiritually militaristic attitude? Because I've realized from the very beginning what God called me to do decades and decades ago. I realized very early on that I'm not here to just present facts to people, which is essential. I'm not here just to debate, which is essential. I'm not here to just give them logical explanations, which is essential. All that's essential. But the root problem is spiritual strongholds or satanic strongholds erected in the hearts and minds of men and women and in our nation in the invisible realm. See, that's the root problem. Behind everything in the material world, the physical world, behind everything in the physical material world, there is a spiritual force or dynamic that is creating everything you see in the physical, natural world that we live in. Okay? And so whatever it is, there's this great battle between God and his angels and God's people versus Lucifer, the fallen angels, and those people who have pledged to serve and worship Lucifer. There's a great battle. And a huge percentage of this battle is taking place in the invisible realm and the spiritual world, which manifests itself in the physical world. But the other part of it is a huge part of this battle, although it exists in the spiritual world first and foremost, it plays out in a literal battle for the hearts and minds of billions of men and women. There's a raging battle going on in their minds and hearts. And that's where the battlefield is. See, that's the area that we have to penetrate. That's why I wrote the book. It's to teach people how to do it. It's to explain what's happening in a way that I don't know of any other author who covers the territory that I cover. And that's not boasting, it's just true. Because I deal with things that a lot of people don't want to deal with. And I've done it with integrity. So it's not like, fictional stuff, it's documented stuff. So that's the purpose of the book. And the purpose of the book is that you, the listener and partner of the Paul McGuire Report, a friend of the Paul McGuire Report, a friend of me, and you who listen on a regular basis who are with me in your spirit, who pray for me and my family in this ministry, you know who you are, and I know who you are, that you would get copies of these books, keep your own copy, because you're going to have to read it a bunch of times. There's a lot of truth in it. But then when you gain the truth, either pass a copy along or get some extra copies and pass them on to people you think need to read it. And by giving it to them, it would do the greatest good. In other words, it would spread. That's essential. And that's essential because that's how we solve the essential problem. The essential problem is this battle going on, which is raging in the hearts and minds of men and women, students, young adults, older people, people of all ages. Anybody listening to the sound of my voice, you know people in your sphere of influence, whether it's family, friends, kids, grandkids, co-workers, neighbors, people that you bump into or whatever. You're very much aware of the spiritual battle that's going on in this world, in our nation right now. And you're very much aware of the spiritual battle that's going on in so many of the lives of people that you meet and know, including family members. You're totally aware of it. And you say, well, how do you know that? I know that for a fact because you don't listen to the Paul McGuire Report on a regular basis unless you do know that. See, the people who listen to this program, I know who they are. You know how I know who they are? Because I have regular Paradise Mountain Church meetings and I meet people face to face. I speak at conferences where I meet people face to face. I attend meetings and gatherings where I meet people face to face. And I am continually stunned by the diversity of age, race, ethnic groups, age, etc., of people from all over the United States, actually all over the world, but I'm speaking of the United States right now, who regularly listen to this program. And they all tell me basically the same thing. They get it. That's why they listen. They're fed by this program. That's why they listen. They understand. They share the burden that I have. You share the burden that I have. That's why you listen. We are connected on a psychological basis. We think in very similar terms. It doesn't mean you agree with everything I say. I don't even agree with everything I say. I mean, really? Do you agree with everything that you say? I mean, I say stuff 1 week or 1 month or 1 year, and then I'll grow or I'll change. It doesn't mean I don't know my mind. It's just that we mature, hopefully. So I know you because I constantly meet people who listen to this program through surprising ways. You know, I walk into a car dealership to help one of my kids get a lease on a car. And because I've been buying cars at a particular car dealership for a long time, the general manager knows me, and I always ask for him, and then he turns me over to one of his salespeople and stuff. So the guy that he assigns to me sees me from a distance, and I see that he's like staring at me intensely, which is making me nervous because I'm going, why is this salesman staring at me intensely? You know, I just like, whoa, I just got it. You know, what is this about? And he was like fixated on me, and it's just the thing is I didn't know why he was fixated on me. I didn't think it was some weird thing. I just couldn't figure it out. And he walks over and he goes, so, you know, he was excited to meet me. He knew my name, and then he tells me, I listen to your program like every night and have been for years and years. And this happens all the time. When people hear my voice, that's what usually triggers it. A lot of time people don't recognize me by appearance because, you know, I do a lot of radio stuff. which is good. But if they hear the name or whatever, it comes up all the time, out of the blue. And it ends up being people that you think would never be listening, and they're listening. My kids, they're adults now. But their friends will hear my name and get all excited because they listen to the program. So it's a diverse group of people. And the point I'm trying to make is that I always get the same feedback of why people listen, because they're getting information on this program that they're not getting elsewhere. And there's a bond there's a bonding that occurs between me and you, because by God's grace, obviously you don't agree with everything I say. That's fine. But there's like a friendship, a bonding, a relationship, which is very strange, because most of the time when you listen to media, you like the person. I mean, you like the person of the TV talk shows or whatever that you like, or whatever, or radio talk shows. You like the person, but you don't feel like you know the person. With me, I hear it all the time. Paul, we love your program. When you talk, it's like we've known you all our life. I hear that all the time. It's like we've known you all of our life. Or, we like the fact that when you talk, you're not talking at us. You're talking like person to person. So we feel like we know you. We're very comfortable around you. So there's a personal thing that happens when you listen to this program, and I hear that feedback all the time. And then I hear, I'll end up, for whatever reason, spending hours or an hour or 15 minutes or whatever with people that I've never met before from all over the United States. And for whatever reason, there's an opportunity for us to talk and spend some time together. And they constantly interrupt the conversation to say, it's like we've known you all our life. Because I think that is because I don't put up boundaries. I try not to be some pompous figurehead, and I'm hopefully real. Well, they tell me I'm real, so they can relate to me. So I'm saying that because that's why I know you, the listener, as a person. And I read your emails and your letters and stuff like that. And there's it's weird because most people in the media this doesn't happen to. It used to happen also in my previous nationally syndicated AM/FM show, the Paul McGuire Show. The same experience would happen. And it happens when I speak at conferences. So I know what your concerns are. They're the same as mine. You're part of that remnant church percentage where you understand what's happening. You see it. And so when I was talking about the fact that you're aware of the great spiritual battle going on in the lives of people you meet, in the lives of people you know, in the lives of family members, you totally are tracking with me when I say that. You get it because you have that same burden from the Holy Spirit. You see that same conflict, and your spirit is grieved as mine is, and you're concerned about, where they're going to go in terms of surrendering to the warfare of their mind, because people, as you well know, can be persuaded by ideas and media and negative influences. So I don't really have to go out of my way to explain that to you because you already know it. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't be listening to the program. So you know what the battle we're facing is. So you look at these events on television, current events. You hear what they want to do in response to climate change. You hear the statements of where powerful voices in American politics are telling the American people that socialism and communism is the answer. And you hear what they propose as solutions to the problems we have in America. And you understand that these are communist socialist solutions. And not only will they not work, they will bring disaster and horror upon our nation because you understand something about history. And so when I hear some of these proposals by people that should know better, I mean, I get very nervous. Not for me, not for you, but for a huge percentage of America that has been so dumbed down that knows nothing about history, that they're seduced by these words because the socialist, communist, Marxist agenda always proceeds on lies, deception, spiritual deception. And when people don't know what happened in history, which most people in America don't, then they bite the bait. And once you bite the bait and you go into a socialist communist society where everything is under dictatorial control, that's it. There's no going back. Once you give away your freedom, that's it. The end of the line. You can't gain it back because you're going to be inside of a prison cell if you try to. So, what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that if anybody was sane, or remotely sane, or rational, remotely rational, or if anybody was a true Christian who truly listened to the Holy Spirit of God and truly read the Word of God on a regular basis and truly prayed to God, not playing church, if that was the case, then everybody who claimed to be a born-again Christian would be having the same burden and concerns that you and I have regarding the future, because the handwriting's on the wall. But the fact that such a huge percentage of Christian pastors, ordinary Christians, churches, are completely in the dark, completely clueless regarding these things, is because they lost the battle for their hearts and minds a long time ago. Ideas were promoted to them, lies were told to them, false belief systems they were indoctrinated with. And so they live in an artificial reality, in a Disneyland make-believe world. And history teaches us the power of human psychology to deny reality when reality is extremely unpleasant. When you're hearing things about reality that are very negative, dark, dangerous, and evil, it is the normal tendency of human beings, and kind of a psychological defense mechanism, to convince yourself that that's not true. That's a conspiracy theory. That's a rumor. That can't possibly be true. That's what those are the tricks the human mind plays on itself throughout history. And the biggest case in point would be Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler. And the whole time, the Nazis were taking over Germany, arresting the Jews, sending them to concentration camps, and then they began the mass executions of not only Jews, but Protestants, Catholics, and others also. A constant thing you heard from the Jews and others was, it can't happen here, which was total psychological denial of what was going on, despite the fact that they were constantly hearing rumors of exactly what was going on. And the reason people do that on the personal level or on a collective level is because the human mind is a funny thing. The human mind would prefer to surrender to an illusion, a delusion, a fantasy, a denial reality where you feel good, okay? Where your anxiety goes away because you're choosing to believe it can't happen here when in fact it is happening here. So that was the psychological thing of what was happening in Nazi Germany. The human mind, even in personal things, it prefers to deny reality as an escape mechanism, because people think, even though they know it's irrational, people think that if they deny the real reality, and just try to have a candy-coated reality and only believe in a candy-coated reality, that they'll have peace of mind and no anxiety and no depression. Now, deep inside, people know it's not true, but it's a weird game that all of us are vulnerable to. That's why there's such a magnetic attraction, especially among Christians, for ministers who only tell them what they want to hear, like positive things, uplifting things. You say, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that in balance. But there's something wrong with that if you don't mix in truth and reality with the positive things. Then you're being dishonest. You're hiding from the people dangers that they could prevent if you simply would be a leader and tell them the truth. So that's what we're up against, this battle in the hearts and minds of mankind. And then you have the very powerful mechanisms of brainwashing, advertising, propaganda, hypnotic-like messages, scientific mind control, and many, many, many technologies and arts and media that know how to program your thoughts and beliefs, starting with the educational system. And people who don't know their own mind, and people who have never done any reading on their own, people who don't know the facts about history, people who don't think for themselves, what happens is they simply function as sponges and they suck up all the lies and the programming that very sophisticated groups and organizations that have a ton of money are bombarding them with in television talk shows, TV comedy shows, music, cultural people, political people, movies, film, television, the whole deal. The whole deal is bombarding you with belief systems that are not true. So people are programmed, for example, to believe that climate change is going to create an environmental Armageddon that's going to destroy planet Earth in the near future. They're absolutely convinced that that is the case. And they've been brainwashed, literally brainwashed and programmed to believe that by the world's elite. Because you see, all that is a pretense to motivate people to give up their personal freedoms, to lower their standards of living, to give up their freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and to accept joyfully kind of being a slave. All of that happens once you buy the big lie of man-made climate change. See, so what the people do, what Huxley called the scientific dictatorship, and if you don't understand everything I'm talking about in fullness, you need to get a copy of The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World, because I explain it all, and you need to know what's happening. Huxley talked about the scientific dictatorship and how you can enslave the masses through scientific mind control. And if the scientific mind control was effective, which he said it should be, then you can literally program people to not understand that they're slaves, and you can program them that they'll have no awareness that they're slaves, and program them that to love their duties as slaves. So it's a bloodless dictatorship, Huxley said. That's what's happening now. You brainwash the people and tell them climate change is about ready to erupt and destroy our planet. And then people, because they've been programmed with fear, they will joyously give up their cars, give up usage of gasoline, give up cars altogether and go to public transportation and ride bicycles, give up any large apartment, condo, house, anything that's large, give it up and go into one of these planned, eco-friendly smart cities where they're selling people on the idea that they can save the planet if they buy a 500 square foot apartment and ride a bicycle. Now, this is not a fantasy. This is happening now. I don't know if it's happening where you live, but in LA and California, where people are not all that balanced mentally to begin with, they're like gung-ho for this lifestyle. So what happens is the real agenda behind climate change has nothing to do with climate change. It's a pretense to create a lockdown totalitarian government from the United Nations in like a UN Agenda 2030. It's a pretense to get people to ride bicycles instead of driving cars, substantially lower their standard of living, live in tinier and tinier places, use less and less energy. And because people are dumbed down, they never bother to think that, hey, none of the people in the elite classes are giving up their cars, giving up their private jets, giving up their multiple mansions. They're all they're burning energy like crazy. But see, people can't think. They've been programmed not to think. So the hidden agenda behind the United Nations Agenda 2030 has nothing to do with climate change. It happens to do with destroying nationalism, destroying an independent sovereign America. Why? Because America's Constitution and Bill of Rights is different than every other government on planet Earth. We're the only nation on planet Earth right now that has a real, genuine list of laws and constitutional rights that actually grant you freedom. Like the Creator, capital C, has given us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which the Founding Fathers wrote because they got it out of the Bible and they understood that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are inalienable rights that come from God, not man, so no human government can take them away. That we have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, so on and so forth. No other nation has these freedoms in their constitution. I've read them. They're all humanistic-based constitutions. So this is all about destroying America as an independent Christian nation, destroying Christianity, destroying marriage, destroying moral absolutes, and destroying nationalism. You say, how do you know that? You need to read my book. I'm serious. You need to read my book and not just think you know it. You need to own this truth. So when you're talking to people, knowledge is power. You know what you're talking about, and they have to listen and learn because they know that you're spiritually and intellectually armed and dangerous. You know what you're talking about. And the book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind, will equip you to do that. So that's the agenda of this. One of our constitutional rights is the right to bear arms. And most people don't understand this, but you don't have any other rights if you get rid of the right to bear arms. You know why? Because you have no way whatsoever in resisting tyranny if it comes. You just helpless victim. There's a reason why, which of course the media doesn't tell you, but there's a reason why that in every communist revolution, Marxist revolution, National Socialist revolution, before they took over the nation and established dictatorships, they confiscated all the guns of the people. In every one of these communist-type revolutions. Why? Chairman Mao said it openly. You don't hear it in the media because they lie to you. Chairman Mao said all power comes from the barrel of a gun. And so the dictators know that once the people are helpless and unarmed, then you can move in with troops and whatever, and you can dominate them and crush them. And anyone who doesn't know that, that's what our founding fathers gave us that right. Anyone who doesn't know that is an idiot and a target for being destroyed because you don't know anything about history. I explain that in the book. And then freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech is essential. Now notice all around us that all of these areas that I just mentioned, and I explain this fully in the book, all of these areas that I just mentioned are under unprecedented, all-out attack. There's a evil agenda to use all these excuses to take away all of our rights. And it's very eerie, and I'll just leave it at that, very eerie, that almost like on cue, all these people are victims of these insane lone gunman shooters. Very weird, because the obvious after effect of that is people panic and are screaming for gun control. Take away all the guns. Well, okay, that sounds like, if you're a moron and you know nothing about history and you're only emotional and you know nothing about reason and logic and history and human nature, that sounds like a wonderful idea. Because if you're an airhead with no belief system, no education, and you're living in the Disneyland of the mind, it sounds like a great idea. We'll solve the problem by taking away all the guns. The problem is that most of these maniacs and psychopaths passed the psychological exams. Most of them would have guns anyway because criminals don't give a hoot about the law. Do you think the people in LA or anywhere else, the armed gangs and criminals and nuts, do you think that they care about whether a gun is legal or illegal? They're going to break the law. They're bad people. They're going to break the law. They're going to get their hands on guns because they're bad people and criminals. Their life is all about breaking the law. It's only the foolish who think, oh, they're gonna obey the law. In your delusionary world, they're going to obey the law. No, they're not going to obey the law. You know what a home of invasion is? Probably most of you do. It happens in just about every city in America. It's when these really evil gangs smash down the door of your house while you're in it, even in nice neighborhoods. And they got tattoos all over their body, and they're armed with the teeth with automatic assault rifles, all that they bought illegally. They're armed to the teeth with automatic assault rifles. Tattoos, they're high on drugs that turn them into fearless psychopaths. They smash down your door. They burst into where you live. And I'm not going to go into the details of what happens in a home invasion, but take the most violent, heavily armed, drugged out of their mind psychopathic criminals who just smashed into a house. And there are young children, girls and boys. There's a newly married couple, a single woman, an elderly woman or an elderly man, or just a middle-aged married couple or whatever. It doesn't matter if you have no way of defending yourself. They are going to they're going to do, for the sake of being polite and sensitive, I'm not going to go into detail what they do. But I think most of you know what they do. But in case there's somebody listening out there who has some delusionary idea about what they do, let me just put it this way. They do the most unspeakable, sadistic, horrific acts imaginable to the young kids, to the single mother, the wife, husband, the elderly couple. And I'm not going to tell you any more of what they do, because it is so obscene, it is so violent, it is so cruel, and that's what they love. See, that's what turns these guys on. And I'm not talking about you, but you got a lot of people in this country who seriously, suburban women. Whew, I talk about suburban women in my book. I talk about this whole dynamic in detail. In fact, in my new book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind, I talk about in detail about the MS-13 gangs and the other gangs. I even have a subchapter called The Clueless Suburbs. And I give you, in a fast-moving read, the secret history of the MS-13 gang, the most violent gang in the world, which is operating all of the United States. They came out of Southern California, Los Angeles. They were first a gang that were all about drugs and listening to heavy metal music. I explained the whole thing in the book. And then through heavy metal music, they got into satanic worship and Satanism and worshiping Satan. And then I talk about more stuff. So you need to know, maybe educate some of these clueless women in the suburbs and clueless women in inner cities and clueless women in apartments and any place and clueless men and clueless marriage couples, because they're under this delusional idea that, because they pay a monthly fee to have a couple of video cameras and alarm systems, that they're safe. Oh my God, may the Lord have mercy on your brain. These guys will rip those cameras off the wall or shoot them before they come near recording range. They will dismantle your alarm system in 30 seconds before it goes off. They will smash through the front door, and they do the unspeakable to you. And you can try calling 911. There's no way 911 and the police, no matter how well-intentioned, are going to even get close to your house in time to save your life and keep the unspeakable from happening. It's not going to happen. There'd be a chance of it happening if there just happened to be a police car parked outside your house or apartment, but otherwise, it's over. You are completely helpless in the face of sadistic, satanically possessed monsters who are armed to the teeth, and their ultimate high is cruelty and abominable acts. That's their real high. And I'm not saying this to scare people. I just want people to wake up. You need to wake up. And meanwhile, the people who are telling you, the cultural leaders, the big politicians, the movie stars, the music stars, the ones all telling you, we need all this gun control, They're telling you that we need gun control. But because of their wealth and affluence, they have very elaborate security gates, walls, fences. They're armed and have armed guards on, not just armed guards, they have ex-military armed guards and teams of ex-military armed guards patrolling the house, being their bodyguards. And if they have any money at all, I'm talking about the elite and the affluent and the famous, they have teams of ex-military, combat-trained armed guards that carry military-grade weapons. And they have alarm systems and all kinds of devices and cars and everything else that they, the elite, have protection from ex-military. So it costs them nothing to say this. It's you that are going to be placed in harm's way. Serious thing. It's a serious thing. So notice the pattern of the media. Notice how propaganda works. Observe it. I explain the details of how propaganda works in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world. So let's take this epidemic of mass shooters gunning down innocent people. Let's say for now that we don't know what caused them to do this. Okay? We do know they don't give a hoot about whether guns are legal or illegal. They're gonna buy them anyway because they're criminals. They're bad people. They have hate in their hearts. They have automatic assault rifles, military-grade weapons, and endless rounds of ammunition and all kinds of stuff. So they kill and shoot to death and slaughter totally innocent people who have done nothing whatsoever to harm them. There's no moral justification for their actions whatsoever. Young men and women in the prime of their life, children, adults, their lives are snuffed out or they're mortally wounded because some psychopath is armed to the teeth. That's a horrible thing. But you notice that horrible thing, which makes us all feel the emotions when we see the footage on television of the bodies and the victims. We all experience the same emotions, which are anger, like why did this happen? Which is frustration, like why doesn't somebody do something about it? Which is anguish over the fact that of the loss of life and pain inflicted. When we're in that emotional state, that's when people who know how to use propaganda, etc., that's the best time to insert and program you with propaganda because you're thinking emotionally, not logically. And so then they send their bombardment of messaging through television interviews, television commentators, celebrities, politicians, saying that we need to take away all guns, we need to take away all guns. And when you're in that emotional state, you're thinking emotionally, not thinking logically. It sounds like a good idea. Yeah, we got to do something. Let's take away all the guns. But you see, you can't. You're being exploited to take action and believe something by propaganda, which is manipulating the fact that you're in a highly emotional state, so you're not thinking clearly. That's when they program you. And another principle of programming and propaganda is you send the message over and over again, and you use the psychological principle of repetition. Repeatedly, over and over again, you say the same messaging, the same commentary, until finally you wear people down and they believe the lie. And you need to know how it works because you're being targeted with all kinds of lies through propaganda. So if you think about it clearly, you're left with this very real, logical, rational, historically based, current event based reality, which is these bad men, many times they're psychopaths, drugged out of their bird with legal or illegal meds, illegally bought themselves military-grade weapons, endless rounds of ammunition, or wearing, armor so that they can't get shot, all kinds of stuff, okay? If you think about it rationally and logically, the only thing that could have prevented all of those slaughters was if somebody who was trained in how to use a firearm had a firearm, that trained citizen who had a firearm, or if there had been more than one trained citizen who had a firearm, the only somebody there at the time when the thing begins could have stopped these maniacs. It's the only way. All the other ways are fantasy land ideas. They don't work. They can't possibly work. And let me give you a real case that I happen to know about that totally illustrates this principle. There was a big megachurch in Colorado. Okay? This was a number of years ago. Big megachurch in Colorado. And what happened was one of these armed psychopaths came on the property of the church. I think the church had like 25,000 people. And the armed psychopath with body armor, automatic military grade assault rifles, endless rounds of ammunition, starts to walk around the campus surrounding the church. And at a certain point, as he gets close to the giant sanctuary, where my friend and spiritual mentor and spiritual father, Pastor Jack Hayford, a founder of the Church on the Way, he had just finished giving the message, the Sunday morning message, to the first packed auditorium of people that gathered for the church service. And so he was walking out and had left. Now, they were preparing for another speaker to give the second message, because this is like huge church. And so they were in that short interlude between the meeting where Jack Hayford spoke, and I know about this because Jack shared it with me. And they were in that interlude between when Pastor Jack Hayford spoke and then when the next speaker was going to speak. But by now, the auditorium was very crowded for the next service. It was packed with people. The psychopathic armed shooter comes in and starts to fire away. I don't remember how many people were killed and injured, okay? Or if there were people that were killed. I know they were injured because something happened. Immediately, you got I don't know how many thousand people, what, 5, 6, 7,000 people in one service after another? That's a lot of targets for a psychopath. And what happened was there was a female woman who was a Christian, a member of the church, who was attending the service, and she was an off-duty police officer. And she was a born-again Christian, off-duty police officer, who happened to be in the sanctuary, and she kept a gun, I guess, wrapped around, her ankle. And so, being a trained law enforcement officer, before he had even opened fire, she knew. She spotted him and saw what was coming. She immediately reaches down, trained like a trained professional, grabs her pistol from her ankle, and as an expert trained marksman, she fires at him. I believe she killed him. She fires at him and kills the psychopath. Now, there were 7,000 people at least in the auditorium. Thousands on the campus. This guy had multiple guns he was carrying and multiple, endless rounds of ammunition. It would have been a massacre had he not been stopped. There would have been dead and bloody people everywhere had he not been stopped. What stopped him was not the confiscation of guns, was not increased police protection, can't have police everywhere. What stopped him was a law-abiding citizen, off-duty female police officer, who was carrying a weapon, knew how to use it, was trained, and because she was an expert marksman, she prevented a bloodbath and a massacre from occurring. I interviewed in my other radio program a number of people who were there. I spoke to Jack Hayford, who was there. a massacre was prevented. And see, that's the only way you can stop this. It's really horrific when people who should know better, people who have private armed armies of ex-military, who have bodyguards that are armed, ex-military, who have walls and expensive security systems that you and I could never afford, lie to you and tell you to give up any hope of arming yourself for the purpose of protection. So what do you have left? 911, get over it. It can't work. It doesn't work. When I was living up in the Hollywood Hills, up on Laurel Canyon and Lookout Mountain, this is a long time ago. We lived up on Lookout Mountain, and I heard gunshots going off, a series of gunshots going off somewhere up further on the mountain. And there were definitely gunshots, and it was a series of them. So I called 911, okay? And things have not changed. I called 911 from a landline phone. Finally got a hold of someone, and I said, you need to send out some police officers immediately. I just heard a whole series of gunshots go off. And I described where I was. Laurel Canyon has like movie stars, it has rock stars, it has had ordinary people like me and my wife. It's a conglomerate of. Jerry Brown used to roar up the hill in his limousine because Madonna had like her castle at the top of the Lookout Mountain. It's a mixture of artists, writers, cultural people, regular people, and some weird people, okay? Drug dealers and stuff, all in the area. So it can be potentially a very dangerous area. And the lady from 911 said to me, has anyone been killed and wounded? And I said, you need to send a police car. And I said, the reason I'm calling you is because I don't want to see anybody killed and wounded. I'm not going to walk over unarmed to where gunshots are being fired and check it out. Well, she said, well, we can't do anything until somebody is killed, wounded, or hurt. So, I mean, this is a completely irrational conversation. You realize that. So, you may say, well, they've changed. They don't, no, please, don't give me a break. I've had people call 911. Nobody comes. I've had to call 911 on very few occasions, but I've called with some serious reports. I didn't see a police car ever show up, waiting for hours. And I was reporting what appeared to be a very life-threatening, dangerous situation. The police are not equipped to handle all the 911 calls. So if you think, or some naive friend you have thinks that they're going to call 911 and they're going to be safe, they're out of their minds. Because the police obviously want to get there, but they can't get there in time. So you are completely defenseless. You understand that. You're completely defenseless. These politicians will make you completely defenseless. And there will be slaughter and the unspeakable happening. And that's the truth. And you have politicians lying to you, manipulating the images. There's a reason our founding fathers gave us that right. The primary reason was to protect us from tyranny. But in our age of a deteriorating society, people have the right to protect themselves. And if you take that right away, they have nothing. So I didn't intend to get into that, but I speak about that in The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind. Because you see, the reason people start to believe these very naive ideas is because they're being brainwashed through advertising, through programming, through very sophisticated people who, what they do deliberately is they take these televised images of these horrific tragedies regarding these mass shooters. They exploit the emotions. You see the deaths, you see the parents weeping, and you're in a very emotional state, and they keep showing you one mass shooter after another, okay? Constant bombardment before your eyes, and then they slide in the gun control messages from the media, which are always biased in favor of taking away all guns. And that's a very irresponsible message to give to people because it will not save lives. Because crazies, psychopaths, criminals, and gang members don't care if guns are illegal. They're not going to go through a background check. And even when they do, we've seen they've passed anyway. They're going to buy them from somebody on the streets who sells arms. You know, it's a no-brainer. So my concern is that people are being manipulated through the media, through advertising, persuasion, propaganda, to believe things that are harmful to them spiritually, harmful to them physically, and they're being programmed with lies. And I expose this in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in history of the world. But in addition to that, it's not just what the media and the political elite and others are messaging and programming into your mind overtly. Perhaps the more insidious form of programming your mind, brainwashing your mind, is by uniformly hiding critical information, data, and statistics from you. And that includes the so-called conservative moderate news network. It hides just as much information as all of the rest of the television, news media outlets, all the rest of all the media. It's not just the propaganda they peddle, it's how they hide and bury and censor and suppress information that is real and true, but they rig the internet to conceal it. They don't cover anything ever. And let me give you a couple examples. Genetically modified organism foods, GMO. The average person knows nothing about them. 98% of any food product you buy in a big food supermarket, 98% of that food is made from genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, which means they come from not the seeds that God created, but the artificial seeds that man created. And these GMO foods are causing destruction to the immune systems of children, the elderly, young people. These GMO foods are triggering large numbers of diseases. You know, I'm talking about serious diseases that children have, adults have, everything else. We have a lot of epidemics of disease which are totally connected to the GMO foods, but you'll never hear reporting about that. You'll never hear in-depth commentary. You'll never hear the same politicians that are crying out for this and that. They won't tell you the truth about GMO foods because the GMO food manufacturer is one of the most powerful multinational corporations in the world, and it's connected to many other powerful groups. Now, if you bother to do research, which I have, and some of you have, and I have that research about GMO foods in my book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind. I mean, I've listened to 2-hour lectures from a prominent biologist on TED Talks, and I believe her talk was censored and removed off TED Talks. And this prominent biologist, who really knew her stuff, gave a detailed scientific lecture. You didn't have to be a genius to understand it. She explained what happens on the level of a cell when foods and all kinds of food products, when they are created by genetically modified organisms. She showed you in detail the scientific and medical reasons why the consumption of GMO foods is responsible for something like, she said, 37 of the major diseases that are breaking out in people right now. That she said through her scientific research and the scientific research of many others, there's a direct link from the consumption of GMO foods to this 37 common diseases. And she says it all has to do with the fact that these GMO foods destroy the immune system. So people are dying. People have tremendous autoimmune diseases, mind diseases, body diseases, and they don't know how to prevent it because they know nothing about what's causing it. You see these stupid ads on television, these commercials for these drugs that have disclaimers that they cause death, insanity, cancer, come on, you've read them. But see, information is being hidden from you. That's very evil. I deal heavily in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind with the new 5G technology. I've done my homework. And I'll just say this, I have a lot of details and a lot of information that you haven't read anywhere on 5G. But I'll simply say this, for those of you who have friends that are skeptical about the danger of 5G, just remember this. And notice how you're not hearing hardly any discussion about the dangers of 5G technology in the mainstream media, even the conservative television network. They don't talk about it. It's scrubbed off the internet. You can only go to alternative media and they'll talk about it. Total censorship, total blackout, if you want to talk about the truth of 5G technology. And here's the basic thing. The current cell phone technology that you're using now, regarding your cell phone, laptop, or whatever, operates anywhere between 2G, 3G, and maybe 4G. Okay? That's basically the vast majority of cell phones and laptops are currently operating at 2G, 3G, 4G. When you move up to 5G, then it takes a quantum leap in the amount of power and energy that is released in a cell phone signal, in the signal going into a laptop. It takes a quantum leap. It's not just you go 2G, 3G, 4G, and they're all the same incremental leap. When you go to 5G, it takes a quantum leap in power and energy being released. And let me put it to you in a manner that you can really relate to. The U.S. military and U.S. law enforcement have technology called directed energy beam weapons. I go into this in my book. Directed energy beam weapons. I've seen military videos of them in usage. And a directed energy beam weapon is about the size of like a 30-inch square television set, but it's thicker, okay? So it's a rectangular black television set type box, but it's thicker. And what they do is they use it for what they call non-lethal purposes, to disperse crowds of riot people and mobs and stuff. They use it to disperse crowds. And what they do is they aim the directed energy beam weapon in the non-lethal mode towards a crowd of violent demonstrators or looters or whatever. And the second the directed energy beam weapon hits them, these people feel like their bodies have been drenched in gasoline and they're burning on fire. They've been lit up with fire. The feeling of being on fire is so intense and painful that they immediately run, like crazy men and women. They run to get out of the direction of the energy beam weapon. And then they feel normal, okay? Now, the power of that directed energy beam, non-lethal, and remember, there's a switch on that non-lethal directed energy beam weapon that can go from non-lethal to lethal. Let's not kid ourselves. But even in the non-lethal mode, the amount of electromagnetic frequency power that is released by the directed energy beam weapons of the U.S. military is the same frequency power as 5G cell phones and laptops. Okay, so directed energy beam weapons run on the same power and frequency as 5G cell phone technology. Now, to give you an understanding of the enormous power of the directed energy beam weapons, they operate on a power level and a frequency, 5G, which is 100 times more powerful than a normal cell phone. So people that are using 5G cell phone technology are using electromagnetic frequency energy that is 100 times more powerful than regular cell phone technology. 5G cell technology that they're going to put in the antennas everywhere in people's neighborhoods. The new 5G cell phone technology radiates energy at the same power level as the U.S. military's directed energy beam weapons. That is a fact. It's 100 times more powerful than a regular cell phone transmission. So all the signals that are going to be bathing your house and bathing bodies and everything else with 5G cell phone technology will have the same level of power as the U.S. military's directed energy beam weapons. Now that is a force that is highly dangerous, and yet you will hear nothing about the dangers. I have read and studied medical reports from medical doctors, reports from medical research organizations, reports from scientists and medical researchers. It's all suppressed, who are contacting the United Nations, and their research is telling them that the 5G cell phone EMF frequency is highly dangerous. It can destroy brain development. It can cause all kinds of neurological diseases, biological diseases, and it has extremely harmful health adverse effects on the human body, and especially children. It is a very dangerous technology, and nobody is testing it properly because there's going to be a lot of money made. And it's dangerous, and it has capabilities to do things. And I explained it in my book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World. It has with it the capacity to interface with satellites in outer space. And then I go into detail about the 20,000 new satellites are going to be launched to blanket the Earth with a 5G energy field. And there's reasons for that, which I don't have time to go into now. But you see, you need to know about that. If you don't know the facts, then you just sound like a screaming lunatic, and everybody will just ignore you. Knowledge is power. And I could tell you more, and I'm going to tell you more. But these are things that you need to know because they affect your future. And the most dangerous thing of all is we live in an environment where there is no freedom of the press. All the media, the mainstream media, is owned by the same four globalist corporations. The big tech people are owned by the four globalist corporations. They have chosen to hide from you all kinds of information because they're going to push their agenda whether you like it or not. And I explained the organizational system behind this and who owns that organizational system. In addition to the relationship between this organizational system, the elite, and what the media will never bring up. Never bring up. The relationship between that organizational system, the occult, and Luciferianism. And this is not some mythological thing. It is something that has documented evidence. Documented evidence. In fact, you talk to your average teenager, your average young person. While most Christians would dismiss this arrogantly and naively as conspiracy theories, by God's divine providence, I guess, there are tens of millions of young people who are obsessed with finding the truth, and they're watching all these documentaries and reading all this information about the Illuminati, this technology, the occult secret societies like Skull and Bones and Bilderberg Group. I mean, I'm talking about secular teenagers. They've been watching these videos, my videos included, my articles on TV included, my books included. They've been watching this stuff and researching it on the internet. And many of them aren't saved yet, but they know more about the realities of this technology and the dark forces behind it than the majority of evangelical Christians in America who live in La La Land or the Disneyland of the mind. And to me, that's a sign of hope, because if they're willing to be that aggressive in pursuit of the truth, the information that we produce in this ministry with our videos, our books, our articles, the radio program, etc., we not only educate people and young people about the occult forces, etc., the Illuminati, but we also present the gospel to them, the gospel of Jesus Christ, in a way that they can relate to. And so I look at it as it's a harvest field that surprisingly has become ripe, and we need to move forward. Jesus Christ said the fields are white with harvest, but the laborers are few. So I ask you to join me and partner with me through your intercessory prayer for me, my family, and this ministry. Help us do an end run around the censorship by sending the links of our programs to people with a personal note from you. And then finally, seek the Lord and ask Him how you can help us through your financial contributions and donations. And together, we can change this so-called inevitable negative outcome. It can be changed. That's the whole point. It can be changed. But in order for it to change, we have to win the battle for the hearts and minds of the people that we know. See, we need to change. We need to make them awaken, aware. And when we do that, then they can act and think intelligently, and together we can change the direction of our nation. And so the very bad, negative scenario that I outlined, it doesn't have to happen, because at least at this point in time, there is still time to change the future. A lot of Christians, they freak out when you say that. They freak out because they don't know the Bible. I am not saying, and I have never said, that we can change what God has written in His prophetic word. God is sovereign. When He writes down something in His prophetic word, it's going to happen. But the time period we're in now, God has given us freedoms. He expects us to use them. That's why He said, occupy until I come. So because people don't really diligently study the Scripture, they come up with half-truths, and they start to believe the lie that we can't change the future. Yes, we can. The only time we can't change the future is when God has given us a prophecy, like the time of the Antichrist or whatever. We're not going to stop that, but that hasn't happened yet. So we need to bring in the harvest while we can. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us.